He was 18 years old when they told him he had inherited a worthless lava tube, and what he discovered inside would change not only his future, but the entire story of his past. If you've ever been told something in your life was worthless, I need you to stick around for this one. And if you feel like this is a community you want to be a part of, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. You're in the right place. The air in Ms. Albright's office always smelled the same: stale coffee, disinfectant, and the faint, papery scent of forgotten files. For the last 6 years of my life, that smell had meant another review, another placement, another quiet lecture about expectations. But today was different. Today, it meant the end. I turned 18 last week. I was, in the sterile language of the state, officially aged out. Ms. Albright slid a manila envelope across the gray laminate of her desk. It was thin, almost insultingly so. It made a soft, scraping sound that seemed too loud in the silent room. "This is it, Leo," she said, her voice betraying a familiar weariness that I knew wasn't just for me. She was weary of the whole system, of the endless parade of kids like me who washed up on her shore and were then swept back out to sea. "Your grandfather's estate." I looked at the envelope. It felt lighter than air. My grandfather? The words felt foreign. I had no memory of him, just a vague third-hand story that he'd lived somewhere remote and had passed away years ago, when I was too young to form a lasting image of his face. My mother, his daughter, had died not long after. That's when my life in the system began. "It's not much," Ms. Albright continued, pulling me from the thought. She tapped a perfectly manicured nail on the envelope. "According to the county records, he owned a small parcel of land, unincorporated. It's mostly a hole in the ground, a lava tube, to be specific." I stared at her. A lava tube. Of all the things a person could leave behind, a watch, a book, a photograph, I had been left a cave. There was a dry, almost funny bitterness to it. It felt like a punchline to a joke I'd been living my whole life. "The land is assessed at almost nothing," she said, her tone shifting to something more practical, the one she used when delivering bad news she believed was for my own good. "Taxes are negligible, but they are due. There is, however, an offer." She slid a second, more official-looking letter from her own file. It was on thick, creamy letterhead. "A development company, Pioneer Ridge Estates, has been buying up parcels in that area. They're offering $500 for the deed. Frankly, Leo, it's more than it's worth. My advice? Take it. Sign the papers, cash the check. It's a start." A start. $500 to begin a life. It felt like an ending, not a beginning. It was the cash value of my entire family history. I picked up the manila envelope. Inside was a folded, brittle-looking deed with my name typed onto a new line. A bus ticket to a town I'd never heard of called Kailo. And the developer's offer letter. My inheritance. A piece of paper, a bus ride to nowhere, and an offer to erase it all for the price of a used television. "I have to go there to sign?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "Their local agent will handle it. The bus ticket is one way. It was included in the probate settlement to allow you to retrieve any personal effects, though the county report says the property is unimproved. That means there's nothing there, Leo. No house, no water, no power. Just the land." She looked at me, and for a second, the professional mask slipped. I saw a flicker of something that might have been pity, or maybe just exhaustion. "Take the money. Get a room somewhere for a month. Find a job. Don't get stuck out there. There's nothing for you in a place like that." I nodded, because that's what I had learned to do. Nod, agree, and disappear. I took the envelope and stood up. The chair squeaked in protest. "Thank you, Ms. Albright." "Good luck, Leo," she said, already turning back to the mountain of files on her desk. My file was now on top of the closed pile. I walked out of her office, down the long linoleum hallway that had been the backdrop to my teenage years, and pushed open the heavy front doors of the facility. The city air hit me, a chaotic mix of exhaust fumes, hot pavement, and street food. It was loud and overwhelming, and for the first time in my life, there was no one telling me when to come back inside. I was free, and I was completely, utterly alone, with nothing to my name but a change of clothes in a backpack, $112 in my pocket from my last foster care stipend, and a deed to a hole in the ground. I walked to the bus station, the manila envelope clutched in my hand like a passport to a country that didn't want me. The developer's offer felt like a weight, a practical, sensible anchor threatening to drown the last flicker of a question inside me. Why a lava tube? Why leave me that, and only that? It made no sense. Ms. Albright's words echoed in my head. "There's nothing for you in a place like that." Maybe she was right. But as I sat on the hard plastic bench, waiting for the bus that would take me away from the only life I'd ever known, I realized that there was nothing for me here either. The bus was old, the seats a faded, cracked vinyl that sighed when I sat down. The journey was long, a slow bleed from the dense, concrete sprawl of the city into the rolling hills and farmland of the interior. For hours, I just watched the world go by, a landscape I'd only ever seen in pictures. The gray gave way to green, then to the darker, more rugged browns and blacks of volcanic country. The skies seemed to get bigger, wider, full of clouds that looked like mountains themselves. The other passengers got off, one by one, in small towns with names like Hopewell and Junction, until it was just me and the driver, a man with a kind, tired face and a deep, rumbling voice. "Kailo's the end of the line, son," he said, looking at me in the rearview mirror. "Not much out there. You visiting family?" The question stung. "Something like that," I mumbled, turning to look out the window. Family was a ghost limb, an ache for something that had been amputated before I ever knew I had it. The bus finally pulled into Kailo. It wasn't so much a town as a suggestion of one. There was a gas station with a small, attached convenience store, a diner with a flickering neon sign that read, "Eat," and a handful of houses scattered along a dusty main street. The bus hissed to a stop in front of the diner. "This is you," the driver said. I grabbed my backpack. "Thanks." "You be careful out here," he added, his voice softer than before. "This land, it's beautiful, but it doesn't forgive carelessness." I stepped off the bus and into the silence. It was a profound quiet, broken only by the wind whistling through the tall, sparse pines that dotted the landscape. The air was thin and clean, smelling of dust and pine needles, and something else, something ancient and rocky. The bus pulled away, its red taillights shrinking into the distance, leaving me utterly alone. For a long moment, I just stood there, a solitary figure in a vast, empty landscape. This was it, the place my grandfather had chosen. I checked the deed. It had a parcel number and a crude, hand-drawn map sketched on the back. It looked to be about 2 miles out of town, off a dirt road that branched from the main highway. 2 miles. It seemed like 100. I went into the diner. An older woman with a web of smile lines around her eyes was wiping down the counter. She looked up as the bell over the door chimed. "Well, hello there. Haven't seen you around before." "Just got in," I said, sliding onto a stool. "Coffee, please." She poured a thick, black liquid into a heavy ceramic mug. "Passing through?" "Staying," I said, the word feeling strange and untrue. "I inherited some property nearby." Her eyebrows went up. "Is that so? Not many people moving to Kaelo these days. Most are moving out. Pioneer Ridge has been buying up everything that isn't nailed down." The name sent a chill through me. "Yeah, I heard. They're promising jobs, a resort up on the North Slope. Most folks think it's a good thing, a little life for a dying town." She eyed me shrewdly. "They make you an offer yet?" "They did," I admitted. "You gonna take it?" I looked down at my coffee. The truth was, I didn't know. Taking it was the smart thing to do, the logical thing. But something had pulled me all the way out here. Some stubborn, illogical need to see it for myself. To stand on the one piece of the earth that was mine, even if it was just a worthless hole. "I want to see it first," I said. She nodded slowly. "Good for you. A man should see what he's selling before he signs it away." She told me the dirt road was called Old Caldera Road, and that it was a straight shot from the edge of town. I thanked her for the coffee, paid the $1 she asked for, and headed out. The sun was lower in the sky now, casting long, sharp shadows across the land. The walk was harder than I expected. The road was rutted and uneven, and the silence was unnerving. I was used to the constant hum of the city, the noise of people living their lives in close proximity. Out here, the only sounds were my own footsteps, the wind, and the distant cry of a hawk circling high above. After what felt like an hour, I found it. A rusty, barbed wire fence, mostly collapsed, and a wooden post with faded numbers that matched the ones on my deed. There was no gate. I stepped over the sagging wire and onto my land. Ms. Albright was right. There was nothing there. Just a field of volcanic rock, tough, scrubby grass, and scattered pines. It was harsh and desolate, but it was also beautiful in a stark, unyielding way. The ground sloped gently upwards towards a low ridge. I followed the slope, my heart pounding with a strange mix of dread and anticipation. And then I saw it. It wasn't a dramatic, gaping cavern, but a subtle depression in the earth, a dark opening partially hidden by a cluster of gnarled juniper trees, the entrance to the lava tube. It looked like a wound in the earth. As I got closer, I saw something else, something that wasn't on the county report. Tucked into the shelter of the ridge, almost invisible from the road, was a small, dilapidated cabin. It was tiny, barely more than a shack, with a sagging porch and a roof patched with sheets of corrugated tin. Its windows were boarded up, and the wood of its walls was weathered to a silvery gray. It looked as ancient and forgotten as the land itself. Hope, fragile and terrifying, fluttered in my chest. Unimproved, the report had said. This was not unimproved. This was a home. Or it had been, once. The front door was stuck fast, swollen in its frame. I put my shoulder to it and pushed. The wood groaned, but didn't budge. I circled the small structure, peering through gaps in the boarded-up windows. I couldn't see much, just shadows and dust. Around the back, I found a small, locked cellar door, set almost flush with the ground. The lock was old and rusted. I picked up a heavy rock and brought it down on the padlock. It took 3 solid hits before the shackles snapped with a sharp crack. The sound echoed in the quiet air. I pulled the wooden doors open. A wave of cool, musty air washed over me, the smell of damp earth and time. A set of steep wooden steps led down into the darkness. My phone's flashlight cut a weak beam through the gloom. The cellar was small, with stone walls and a dirt floor. It was mostly empty, save for a few rotting wooden crates and a stack of old newspapers. But in the corner, half buried under a pile of burlap sacks, was a metal toolbox. It was heavy and cold to the touch. I lifted the lid. Inside, nestled amongst rusted wrenches and screwdrivers, was a small, oilskin pouch. My fingers fumbled with the drawstring. I tipped the contents into my palm. It wasn't money. It wasn't a jewel. It was a single, heavy, old-fashioned iron key. I knew, with a certainty that settled deep in my bones, what it was for. I took it back to the front of the cabin. The key fit perfectly into the lock on the front door. It turned with a grinding shriek of protest from the rusted tumblers. The door swung inward on complaining hinges, opening into a single, dusty room. The last rays of the setting sun streamed through the open door, illuminating a scene frozen in time. There was a simple wooden table and one chair. A small, pot-bellied stove stood in the corner. A narrow cot was pushed against the far wall, a threadbare blanket folded neatly at its foot. On the table, in the very center of the room, sat a lantern and a box of matches. Everything was covered in a thick layer of dust, the dust of years. It was the room of someone who expected to come back, but never did. My grandfather. I lit the lantern. The wick caught, and a warm, flickering light pushed back the shadows. It felt like a sacred act, like waking a sleeping place. I explored the small space, my fingers tracing lines in the dust on the simple furniture. In a small built-in cupboard, I found a few tin plates, a mug, and a single, well-worn book. A field guide to North American geology. Tucked inside the book was a photograph. A young woman with my eyes and a shy smile stood with her arm around an older man with a kind, weathered face. He was looking at her with a fierce, protective love that took my breath away. My mother and my grandfather. It was the first picture of either of them I had ever seen. I sank into the chair, the photograph clutched in my hand, and a wave of grief so profound it felt like a physical blow crashed over me. I was sitting in my grandfather's chair, at his table, in a home I never knew existed. I cried then. I cried for the little boy who grew up in sterile rooms, believing he was completely alone. I cried for the mother I couldn't remember, and the grandfather I'd never met. I cried for all the lost years. After a long time, the tears subsided, leaving behind a hollow ache. The cabin was silent, the lantern light casting a gentle glow. I knew I couldn't stay here for the night. I had no food, no water, and the temperature was dropping fast. But I also knew I wasn't going back to town to sign any papers. Not yet. Not until I understood. I took the lantern and headed for the lava tube. The entrance was a dark maw, breathing a steady stream of cold air. I hesitated at the edge, a primal fear of the dark, of enclosed spaces prickling my skin. But the need to know was stronger. I took a deep breath and stepped down into the earth. The transition was immediate. The air grew still and cold, and the sounds of the outside world vanished, replaced by the echo of my own breathing and the crunch of my boots on the loose gravel of the cave floor. The lantern light carved a small circle of safety in an ocean of absolute black. The tube was immense, the ceiling arching high above me, lost in the darkness. The walls were smooth, rippled rock, the frozen current of a river of fire that had flowed thousands of years ago. It was terrifying, and it was magnificent. I walked deeper, following the gentle downward slope of the floor. The beam of my lantern danced across the walls, revealing strange and beautiful rock formations. It felt like walking through the bones of the world. After about 50 yards, I saw it. Against the far wall, almost blending into the shadows, was a man-made object. A large, heavy metal footlocker, like something from the military. It was secured with a thick, modern padlock. This was it. This was the reason. I tried the key from the cabin, but it didn't fit. Of course it didn't. That would have been too easy. I examined the lock. It was a combination lock, 4 digits. My heart sank. It could be anything. A birthday, an anniversary, a random number, 1,000 possibilities. I sat down on the cold rock floor, the lantern beside me, its light making the shadows dance. I felt a surge of despair. I had come all this way, found this place, only to be stopped by a lock I couldn't open. I thought about the cabin, about the few things my grandfather had left behind. The geology book, the photograph, the simple, sparse life. What numbers would have been important to a man like that? I pulled out the deed from my backpack. I looked at the parcel number, 4865. I tried it. The lock didn't budge. I tried my mother's birthday, which I knew from my state file. Nothing. I tried my own. Nothing. I was about to give up, to head back to the surface and admit defeat, when my eyes fell on the geology guide I'd tucked into my bag. I opened it randomly. The page showed a cross-section of a stratovolcano. I flipped through the pages, not knowing what I was looking for. Then, a page fell out. It wasn't part of the book. It was a single sheet of paper, torn from a notepad. On it was a single, hand-drawn diagram of 4 chemical symbols and their atomic weights, circled in red ink. Si, 28.08. O, 15.99, Al, 26.98, Fe, 55.84, silicon, oxygen, aluminum, iron, the main components of basalt, the rock that forms lava tubes. It wasn't a formula, it was a clue. It was a message from a geologist to his grandson. My hands were shaking. I looked at the numbers. They were too long, but maybe it was simpler. I looked at the first 2 digits of each atomic weight, 28, 15, 26, 55. I tried them in that order. The lock clicked open. It was so loud in the silence of the cave, it made me jump. For a moment, I just stared at it, my heart hammering against my ribs. He had left me a puzzle, a test. He had trusted that I would be curious enough, stubborn enough, to find my way here, and smart enough to figure it out. He had believed in a person he'd never even met. With trembling hands, I lifted the heavy lid of the footlocker. The inside was lined with oilcloth to keep out the damp, and it was full. On the very top lay a stack of envelopes, tied together with a faded piece of twine. They were addressed to me, Leo. Beneath the letters were stacks of cash, wrapped in waxed paper and secured with rubber bands. It wasn't a fortune, but it was more money than I had ever seen in my life. Tens of thousands of dollars. And beneath the money, there were documents, geological surveys, mineral rights claims, and a thick file of legal correspondence between my grandfather, a lawyer, and Pioneer Ridge Estates. I picked up the letters. The top one was thicker than the rest. I untied the twine and opened it. The handwriting was strong and clear, the ink slightly faded with time. "My dearest Leo," it began, "if you are reading this, then I am gone, and you have found your way home. I am so sorry that I could not be there to give this to you myself. I am sorry for so much. I need you to understand. I need you to know that you were never, ever abandoned. You were protected." I had to stop reading. The words blurred through a sudden film of tears. I wiped my eyes on my sleeve and continued, the lantern light flickering on the page. Your mother, my brave Elara, got mixed up with a very dangerous man before you were born. He was involved in organized crime, and when she tried to leave him, he wouldn't let her go. He was powerful, connected. He hurt her. When she found out she was pregnant with you, she knew she had to escape. She came to me. We ran. We came out here, to this piece of land I had bought years ago, a place I came to study the rocks, a place I knew was remote enough to disappear. We built the cabin together. For a little while we were safe. We were happy. You were born in that little cabin, Leo, your first home. The cave seemed to shrink around me, the air growing thick. I was born here, in that tiny silver-gray shack. This wasn't just my grandfather's land. It was mine. It was my beginning. But they found us, the letter continued. The man your mother ran from, his name was Marcus Thorne. His family had deep roots in the region, and they had their hands in everything. They didn't come with threats. They came with lawyers and geologists of their own. You see, this land, this worthless piece of rock, isn't worthless at all. It sits on top of one of the richest deposits of rare earth minerals in the state, the kind of minerals used in high-tech electronics. It's worth millions. I discovered it during my surveys years ago and filed the mineral rights claim. But I kept it quiet, hoping to save it for your mother, for you. Thorne's people found out. They tried to force me to sell. When I refused, they started to play dirty. They framed me for a crime, manufactured evidence. It became clear they would stop at nothing to get this land. They wanted to put me in prison and take everything. My blood ran cold. Pioneer Ridge Estates. It wasn't just a development company. The legal file in the box, the name on the letterhead for their counsel was Thorne, and Associates. It was him. It was his family. They had been circling this property for 20 years. Your mother was terrified, my grandfather wrote. She was afraid they would take you. She made the hardest decision of her life. She took you, just a baby, and she went back. Not to him, but to the city. She thought if she disappeared into the system, if she gave you up temporarily, you would be safe. You would be a ward of the state, untraceable, with no connection to me or this land. She planned to get a job, save money, and come back for you as soon as the danger passed. She made me promise to stay here, to guard this place for you, for your future. It was the last time I ever saw her. He went on to describe her death a year later, a hit and run in the city, ruled an accident. But he never believed it. He believed Thorne had found her. After that, he was truly alone, haunted by his promise. He fought them in court for years, draining his savings, becoming a recluse, the crazy old man on the mountain. He lived in that cabin, guarding your inheritance, making sure the deed and the mineral rights were ironclad and would pass to you, his only heir, on your 18th birthday. He had built a fortress of paper around your future. The money in this box, the final paragraph read, is everything I have left. It's not much, but it's enough for you to hire a good lawyer. Don't trust the ones in Kalo. Thorne owns most of them. The documents will prove your claim. Pioneer Ridge, or whatever they call themselves now, they know the deed transfers to you. Their $500 offer is an insult, a test. They are hoping you are just another lost kid from the system who will take the quick cash and disappear. They are underestimating you. I know they are. Because you are Ilara's son. You have her strength. This land is your birthright, Leo, but it is also a choice. You can take the money and run, disappear, build a new life far away from here. No one would blame you. It would be the safe thing to do. Or you can stay. You can fight. You can claim what is yours. The choice is yours and yours alone. Whatever you decide, know that you were loved. You were always, always loved. I folded the letter, my hands shaking uncontrollably. The silence of the cave was a living thing now, filled with the ghosts of my family. My whole life, I had believed a narrative written for me by social workers and case files, a story of abandonment, of being unwanted. And in one night, in a cold, dark cave, that story had been burned away and replaced with a truth that was both heartbreaking and beautiful. It was a story of fierce love, of impossible sacrifice, of a quiet man who spent 2 decades alone, guarding a legacy for a grandson he would never meet. The weight of it all, the grief and the anger and the sudden shocking clarity was overwhelming. I leaned my head against the cold metal of the footlocker and wept. I wasn't just crying for myself anymore. I was crying for my mother, for the choice she had to make. I was crying for my grandfather, for his lonely, loyal vigil. And I was crying because for the first time in my life, I knew where I came from. I belonged to this desolate, beautiful, secret-filled place. This is probably a good time to pause, because what I was feeling in that cave, maybe you felt something like it too. That moment when the story you've been told about your own life turns out to be wrong. When you realize that what looked like abandonment was actually protection, that what felt like neglect was a deep, hidden love. If this is hitting you, if you've ever had a moment that just turned your whole world upside down, let me know in the comments. I read every single one. Your stories matter. And if you're finding value here and you haven't yet, please consider subscribing. We're building a community here for people who have been through it and come out the other side. You are not alone. Now, let's get back to what happened next. I spent the night in the cave. I couldn't bear to leave. I ate a protein bar from my pack and read every single one of my grandfather's letters. They were filled with stories of my mother as a little girl, his observations on the geology of the area, his lonely thoughts. It was a lifetime condensed into a small stack of paper. By the time the first hint of dawn touched the entrance of the cave, a cold resolve had settled in my bones. I knew what I had to do. Taking the money and running was tempting. It was the life I was supposed to want, an escape, a clean slate. But it would have been a betrayal of my mother's sacrifice and my grandfather's faith. My clean slate wasn't somewhere else. It was right here, under my feet. I packed up the letters, the documents, and the cash, locked the footlocker, and walked out of the lava tube into the pale morning light. The world looked different. The rocks and the trees, the vast sky. It all felt like it was mine now, a part of me. I walked the 2 miles back to town, my mind clear and my purpose set. The diner was open. The same woman was behind the counter. She gave me a knowing look as I sat down. "You're back," she said. "Decide to take the offer?" "No," I said, my voice steady. "I've decided to stay." I ordered a big breakfast, the first real meal I'd had in days, and I ate every bite. Then I used the payphone on the wall. My first call was to the number on the Pioneer Ridge Estates letterhead. A crisp, professional voice answered. "Mr. Thorne's office." I asked for the agent who had signed the letter. When he came on the line, his voice was smooth, patronizing. Ah, Mr. Reyes, I trust you've had a chance to consider our generous offer for that useless bit of scrubland. I have, I said, my voice colder than I thought possible. And the offer is rejected. There was a pause on the other end. I see. May I ask why? $500 is more than fair for a property with no access and no value. The value of the property is not up for discussion, I said, quoting a line from one of my grandfather's legal letters. I have a copy of the 1998 Geological Survey and the registered mineral rights claim. Any further attempts to contact me with offers below fair market value, which we both know is in the 8-figure range, will be considered harassment and forwarded to my legal counsel. The silence on the other end of the line was profound. I could almost hear the gears turning, the shock and recalculation. The lost kid from the system was not playing his part. "Who is this?" he finally sputtered. "This is Leo Reyes," I said, "the owner." And I hung up. My hand was shaking, but I was smiling. My second call was to Ms. Albright. It was early, but I knew she'd be in her office. "Leo," she answered, her voice full of surprise. "Did you get things settled? Did you take the offer?" "No, Ms. Albright," I said. "I'm not selling." "Leo, what are you talking about? There's nothing there for you. You can't live in a field. You need to be practical." "There's a cabin," I told her, "and a lot more you don't know about." The state was wrong. Everyone was wrong. I explained a little of it, not everything, but enough. I told her about the cabin, the letters, the mineral rights. I told her I was staying. She was silent for a long time. I expected a lecture, another warning about being practical. But when she finally spoke, her voice was different, softer. "Be careful, Leo," she said. "These are serious people you're dealing with." "I know," I said. "My grandfather dealt with them for 20 years. "What do you need?" she asked. "I can't offer much, but—" "I don't need anything," I said, and the truth of that statement hit me with the force of a tidal wave. For the first time in my life, I didn't need anything from the system. "I just wanted to let you know I'm okay. I'm home." I hung up before she could reply. I felt a seismic shift inside me. The boy who had left her office 2 days ago was gone. In his place was a man who knew his own history, who had a fight on his hands, and who was, for the very first time, standing on his own 2 feet on his own land. The next few weeks were a blur of activity. I used some of the money to buy a used pickup truck, tools, and supplies. I started work on the cabin. I patched the roof properly, replaced the rotten boards on the porch, and installed a small solar panel system for electricity. I cleaned out the years of dust and neglect, and slowly the little shack began to feel like a home again. I drove to the next county and found a lawyer, a sharp, no-nonsense woman who specialized in property and mineral rights. When I showed her my grandfather's files, her eyes widened. "Your grandfather was one heck of a fighter," she said, poring over the documents. "He built you a fortress. They can't touch you. They'll try to bully you, tie you up in court, but this claim is ironclad." The threatening letters from Thorne and Associates started arriving, as expected. But now they went straight to my lawyer, who responded with her own brand of legal venom. The fight wasn't over, but the battlefield had been leveled. I learned to live with the rhythm of the land. I spent my days working on the cabin and my evenings reading my grandfather's books, learning about the geology that had shaped my life. I explored the lava tube, which no longer felt scary, but sacred. It was a monument to my family story. The people in Kylo started to treat me differently. My story, or a version of it, had spread. The quiet kid who inherited the old hermit's land was staying. and he was fighting the big developer. One day, the woman from the diner, whose name I learned was Martha, drove out to my property. She had a basket with a hot meal in it. "Thought you could use this," she said, not meeting my eye. "It's not easy what you're doing." It was a small gesture, but it meant the world. It was the beginning of a community, a quiet network of support that my grandfather had never had. Months turned into a year. The legal battle with Pioneer Ridge dragged on, but my lawyer was confident. They had no legal standing, only intimidation tactics. In the meantime, I was living. I had fixed up the cabin into a comfortable, self-sufficient home. I had started taking online geology courses, using the knowledge my grandfather had left me as a foundation. I was no longer just guarding his legacy. I was building on it. One afternoon, I was sitting on my newly built porch, looking out at the stark, beautiful landscape. The wind was blowing, carrying the scent of pine and dust. It was the same view my grandfather must have looked at for 20 years. I used to think inheritance was about money, about property, but I was wrong. My inheritance wasn't the minerals under the ground, worth millions. It wasn't even the cash in the box that gave me my start. My true inheritance was the story. It was the truth that replaced a lifetime of feeling worthless and alone. It was the knowledge that I came from a line of people who were brave and loyal, and who loved me enough to make impossible sacrifices. Home isn't 4 walls and a roof. I learned that growing up in a dozen different houses that were never mine. Home is a story. It's the place where your past makes sense and your future feels possible. My home was a dilapidated cabin and a dark hole in the ground. It was worthless to everyone else, but to me, it was everything. It was the place that saved me, not by giving me wealth, but by giving me myself. The fight with Pioneer Ridge isn't over. People like that don't give up easily. But now, I'm not afraid. This land is in my blood. The iron in the rock is the iron in my spine. I am my grandfather's grandson, and I'm not going anywhere. So, that's my story. It's a story about how the things people tell you are worthless can sometimes hold the most value. It's about finding your history, and in doing so, finding your future. And now I want to turn it over to you. What's the most valuable thing you've ever inherited that had nothing to do with money? Was it a story? A piece of advice? A lesson from a grandparent or a parent that changed your life? Share it in the comments below. I truly believe our stories are the most powerful things we have, and by sharing them, we help each other heal and grow. Thank you for being here, for listening. If this story resonated with you, if you believe in second chances and the power of finding where you belong, please hit that subscribe button and join our community. You are welcome here. You are seen, and you are not alone.